Why did the wind seem to pause the moment she stepped onto the range? No one turned at first. They were too busy staring downrange, too busy pretending they weren't rattled. 20 Marines, men who carried confirmed kills like quiet scars, stood in a loose line beneath a sun that felt sharper than it should have been that early in the morning. Sweat darkened their collars. Pride weighed heavier than their rifles. The target stood untouched, 1,200 yards away, center mass clean, mocking. The Barrett lay on the mat like it was offended by them. Gunnery Sergeant Callahan didn't say much. He rarely did when men expected him to explain failure. He'd learned a long time ago that excuses were louder than truth. The wind howled again, hot and erratic, snapping the range flags in conflicting directions. The kind of wind that turned math into guesswork. The kind that exposed who trusted fundamentals and who trusted reputation. Someone muttered that the conditions were impossible. Callahan didn't respond. He just raised a hand. Break 15 minutes, coffee's coming. Relief moved through the line mixed with irritation. They scattered, some checking ballistic apps, others staring at the wind like it had personally betrayed them. The rifle remained where it was, untouched, barrel still warm. Callahan stayed behind the spotting scope, eyes unfocused, remembering a different range, a different wind, a different Marine who never said impossible unless he meant it. That was when the footsteps reached him. Light controlled, no rush, no hesitation. Coffee gunny, fresh, black, no sugar. Callahan turned. She was small, younger than most of the men who'd failed that morning. Her utilities were clean, her posture exact. Strawberry blonde hair tucked into a regulation bun. A tray balanced in her hands like it was part of her body, cups aligned with careful precision. Not a drop spilled, even as the wind tugged at her sleeves. A cook. That's all anyone else saw. Callahan noticed the rest. The way her eyes swept the range before she spoke. The rifle, the flags, the shooters, the target, a single glance efficient and complete. The way she shifted her weight without thinking, compensating for the uneven ground. Muscle memory, awareness. "Thank you, Corporal," he said. The coffee was perfect, not just hot, right. The snipers descended on the tray, laughter returning in forced bursts. Frustration needed somewhere to go. One of the younger Marines smirked, voice carrying farther than he intended. 20 of us miss, huh? Hell, I bet even the mess hall cook could hit it. The laughter that followed was sharp, defensive, brief. Then it stopped. Because the corporal didn't flinch. She turned slowly, eyes pale and steady, and looked at him, not angry, not embarrassed. Something else lived there. Recognition. Like she'd heard that challenge before in another place from someone who'd underestimated her and paid for it. "I'll take that bet," she said quietly. No one laughed this time. Callahan felt the shift before anyone else did. The way the air tightened. The way curiosity replaced mockery. The corporal set the tray down carefully, removed her apron, folded it, placed it aside, took off her cover and smoothed her hair, not out of nerves but habit. "You don't have to do this," Callahan said low. She met his eyes. For just a heartbeat, something old and tired surfaced there. Grief maybe, or memory. Then it vanished. "Yes, Gunny," she said, "I do." She knelt beside the rifle. Every trained shooter on the line went still. Her body alignment was wrong for someone who didn't belong there. Too precise, too practiced. She didn't fumble with the weapon, didn't ask questions, didn't check if it was loaded. She knew it was. Cycled the bolt smoothly, more ritual than necessity. Her hands moved over the rifle with familiarity, not curiosity. The jokes died completely. She settled in, cheek weld perfect on the first try, trigger finger indexed patient. She closed her eyes. Breathed. Once, twice, 3 times. Callahan felt his chest tighten. That breathing wasn't taught in boot camp. It was learned over years, over consequences. When she opened her eyes, the range disappeared for her. The wind hit her face and she read it like language, lips moving slightly as calculations formed and dismissed themselves. She didn't ask for numbers. She didn't need them. She waited, not for the wind to stop, for the space between heartbeats. The rifle cracked. Muted final. Callahan watched through the scope as the bullet flew. 3 seconds that felt longer than any he could remember. Then the target jumped. Center mass. Dead center. Silence swallowed the range. No one spoke. No one moved. The wind returned like it hadn't just been holding its breath. Again, Callahan heard himself say, 2 more. She didn't celebrate, didn't look back. She chambered another round and repeated the ritual: breath, stillness, timing. Second impact, 2 inches from the first. Whispers started, luck, fluke, can't be real. The third shot answered them. Closer still. She set the rifle down gently, cleared it, returned it exactly as she'd found it. Then she stood, brushed the dust from her knees and faced them. Someone finally found their voice. Who the hell are you? Her expression softened for just a moment. Nobody, she said, just a cook. She gathered her apron and tray and walked away, leaving 20 elite snipers staring at a truth they weren't ready for. Callahan watched her go, a memory surfacing uninvited. A funeral years ago. A man who taught him that impossible was just another word for unfinished. He already knew. This wasn't over. Why did the silence follow her longer than the wind ever could? For several seconds after she disappeared beyond the berm, no one moved. The target downrange bore 3 clean holes like punctuation marks at the end of a sentence no one had expected to hear. Pride didn't just bruise that morning. It cracked, and cracks had a way of letting truth leak through. Gunnery Sergeant Callahan lowered the spotting scope slowly, as if sudden movement might shatter whatever fragile order remained. His hands were steady again now, but his chest still felt tight. He'd seen rare skill before. He'd trained it, broken it down, rebuilt it in others. What he just witnessed wasn't raw talent. It was something older, something earned. The snipers began talking all at once, quiet at first, then louder, questions layered over disbelief. Was that even possible? She didn't dial wind. No warm-up. That grouping. Callahan raised a hand. The noise died instantly. Secure the range, he said. We're done here. No one argued. They packed up with unusual care, like men leaving a place where something sacred had happened without permission. The rifle was returned to its case. The target downrange would be retrieved later, examined like evidence. Callahan stayed behind again. He always did when something didn't sit right. Across base, the mess hall was already alive with the midday rhythm. Trays clattered, steam hissed, orders were shouted and repeated. Corporal Rowan Thorne stood at her station, sleeves rolled, knife moving in clean, economical strokes through a pile of vegetables. Chop, turn, chop. The same precision she'd used on the range, now applied to onions and carrots. Her hands didn't shake. That bothered her more than she expected. She'd spent years building a quiet life around repetition. Routine dulled memory. Duty kept questions at bay. But the shot that morning had cracked something open. The feel of the rifle in her shoulder. The weight of the wind on her face. The moment between heartbeats. It all came rushing back like a language she'd pretended to forget but never truly had. She'd known it would. That's why she'd stayed away. A voice cut through the noise. Corporal Thorne. She looked up. Callahan stood at the end of the prep line, expression unreadable. Office after shift. Yes, Gunny. No curiosity in her voice, no fear, just acceptance. She finished her work without mistakes, though the memories kept circling. A different range, colder air, a man kneeling beside her, correcting her grip with patience, not pressure, teaching her that control mattered more than strength, that discipline mattered more than ego. She hadn't touched a rifle since the funeral. Callahan's office smelled faintly of coffee and old paper. He waited until she stood across from him before speaking. "You didn't learn that on mess duty," he said. "No, Gunny." He studied her for a long moment. "Your record says 6 years culinary specialist. No marksmanship billets, no competitions, no special schools." "That's accurate. It's not complete." Her jaw tightened. "I didn't lie." "I know." His voice softened slightly. "You just didn't volunteer." Silence stretched between them, heavy but not hostile. "Who trained you?" he asked. She hesitated, just long enough. "My father." Callahan exhaled slowly. The name he'd been holding back surfaced on its own. "Captain Garrett Thorne." Her eyes flicked up sharp. "You knew him." "I served with him." Callahan leaned back, called him Ghost, quietest shooter I ever met, meanest wind reader I've ever seen. The room felt smaller. "He taught you young," Callahan continued, "and well." She nodded once, "before he died. I was at his funeral." That landed harder than any accusation. She swallowed. "They told me he died on a routine patrol," she said. "That's all." Callahan didn't respond immediately. He stood, walked to the window, watched Marines move across the quad below. "That's what the paperwork said," he finally replied. She didn't miss what he didn't say. "Why now?" she asked. "Why bring this up?" "Because," Callahan said quietly, "people like your father don't train people like you for nothing. And because shots like the one you took don't stay buried." As if summoned by his words, a knock came at the door. "Enter." The man who stepped inside carried age-like armor, tall, broad-shouldered, silver hair cut short, eyes pale and sharp, scanning the room the way shooters scan terrain. Rowan knew who he was before he spoke. "Corporal Thorne," he said, "I'm Elijah Stone." The name landed like gravity. Her father had spoken it once, only once, with respect. They sat across from each other, the desk between them feeling like neutral ground. "You look like him," Stone said eventually. Same stillness. "I didn't come here for compliments," Rowan replied, voice steady. "Good," he said. "Neither did I." He leaned forward. "What did they tell you about how your father died?" She answered without hesitation. She'd rehearsed it in her mind for years. Taliban ambush, recon patrol, KIA. Stone nodded slowly. "That's the version meant to survive scrutiny." Her fingers curled slightly. "And the truth?" Stone held her gaze. "Your father wasn't on a patrol, he was hunting a man." The word settled, sharp and dangerous. "A Russian arms broker," Stone continued. "Responsible for hundreds of deaths. He wasn't authorized to go after him. Command denied it. Your father went anyway." Her chest tightened. "You're saying he disobeyed orders." "I'm saying he chose responsibility over permission." Stone's voice roughened. "We were betrayed, walked into a kill zone. He held it long enough for the rest of us to get out." Her throat burned. "Last thing he told me," Stone said softly, "was to take care of you." Silence swallowed the room. Stone reached into his bag and slid a worn notebook across the desk. "He kept this," he said, "from the time you were a kid until the day before he died." Rowan stared at the familiar handwriting on the cover. She didn't open it yet. "Why show me this now?" she asked. Stone's eyes hardened. "Because the man he died trying to stop is still alive." He turned a laptop toward her. A photograph filled the screen. An older man, hard-eyed, standing beside a ranch truck beneath a wide Montana sky. "He's planning a deal," Stone said. 50 missiles, domestic buyers. If it happens, people die." Rowan looked at the image, something cold and focused settling over her thoughts. "You need a shooter," she said. Stone nodded once. "I need someone who can make an impossible shot." Callahan watched her carefully. She thought of the range, the wind, the space between heartbeats. She finally opened the notebook. And the past breathed again. Why did the words in her father's handwriting feel heavier than any rifle she'd ever held? Rowan didn't read the notebook all at once. She couldn't. The first page alone stole the air from her lungs. Her father's writing was exactly as she remembered it, precise, restrained, economical. No wasted words, no emotion unless it mattered. Dates, locations, wind notes, distances, decisions. Each entry was a life balanced against another. She sat on her bunk long after lights out, the barracks quiet except for the distant hum of base generators. With every page she turned, the man she'd buried 8 years ago stepped closer, not as a memory, but as a presence. This wasn't a soldier chasing adrenaline. This was a guardian carrying weight no one else volunteered to touch. Then she reached the last entries. The handwriting tightened slightly, not fear, urgency. Command denial, target confirmed, can't let this go. Her chest ached. The final page wasn't tactical, it was personal. If I don't come back, I hope Rowan understands. I hope she knows this was never about taking a life. It was about stopping someone who would take many. She has the gift. I taught her so she'd never be helpless in a world that doesn't warn you before it breaks. Rowan closed the notebook carefully, like closing a door that could never fully shut again. By morning, the decision was already made. She found Stone in the same office, coffee untouched, staring out the window like a man who'd been awake all night expecting her. "I'll do it," she said, "but I do it clean, one shot, my father's methods." Stone nodded, unsurprised. Wouldn't trust it any other way. Training didn't feel like returning to something lost. It felt like waking a limb that had never truly gone numb. The facility was isolated, forgotten by maps and memory, concrete buildings bleached by sun, a range carved into emptiness. Rowan lay prone for hours at a time, relearning patience before precision. Stone didn't coddle her. He corrected only when necessary. Let silence teach the rest. She missed shots at first. That rattled her more than she expected. "You're thinking too much," Stone said once, not unkindly. "You're trying to be who you were, be who you are now." The words settled. By the end of the first week, she wasn't missing anymore. The mountains were worse. Thin air, unpredictable wind, cold that crept into bone and stayed. She learned how her father's rifle behaved when pushed past comfort, past doctrine, past what most people considered reasonable. "Montana won't forgive hesitation," Stone reminded her. "You won't get a second look." She practiced until certainty replaced hope. The night before they left, Rowan sat alone with the rifle across her lap. She ran her fingers along the worn stock, stopping where her father had carved her name inside, hidden from the world. Aim true. She slept for exactly 2 hours. Montana greeted them with beauty so calm it felt like a lie. Wide skis, quiet roads, a place that didn't look like it could hide monsters. Rowan studied the ranch through glass and patience, mapping movement, waiting for patterns to reveal themselves. Her position was perfect, concealed, elevated, far enough to feel unreal. Waiting was the hardest part. By the time the target appeared, her hands were steady, her breathing slow. Through the scope, the man who had taken her father from her filled the reticle. He looked ordinary. That was the most dangerous thing about him. Stone's voice came through the earpiece. "Wind quartering right, you have the shot." Rowan found the space between heartbeats. She didn't think about revenge. She thought about responsibility. The trigger broke clean. The bullet flew. When it struck, the valley seemed to exhale. "Target down," she said calmly. She should have left then. That was the plan. But plans don't survive contact with betrayal. Gunfire erupted below, not chaos, coordination. Stone's voice sharpened. "We're taking fire, this was a setup." Rowan stayed on the scope, already understanding. I'm staying, she said. Negative, Stone replied. Extract. She didn't argue, she just acted. Targets appeared where Stone called them. Distances blurred. Adjustments became instinct. Each shot carried weight, not triumph. Every impact ended a threat but added another to her conscience. Her father's rifle sang in disciplined cadence. When ammunition ran low, she counted breaths instead of rounds. The final shot stretched beyond comfort, beyond what even her father had attempted. The calculations stacked against her like a dare. She took it anyway. The impact dropped the shooter pinning Stone's team. Silence followed, then movement, then relief. By the time she reached extraction, her legs burned and her hands trembled, not from fear, but from what she'd done to keep others alive. Stone looked at her like he was seeing a ghost made flesh. You carried it, he said quietly, just like him. She didn't answer. Back at base days later, Rowan returned to the mess hall. The smell of food, the noise, the normalcy, it all felt fragile now. At night, she added one entry to the notebook. Mission complete, weight accepted. She closed it and placed it beneath her pillow, not as a relic, but as a reminder. Some people carry storms, so others can live in clear skies. She would never speak of it. She didn't need to. The wind already knew. Why did the world feel louder once the shooting stopped? Rowan noticed it the moment she stepped back onto base. The clang of trays in the mess hall sounded sharper. Voices overlapped more than she remembered. Even laughter felt aggressive, like it didn't know how close it had come to disappearing forever. Life hadn't slowed down while she was gone. It never did. That was the strange cruelty of it, how the world kept breathing while some people learned how close it had been to suffocating. She moved through her days quietly, exactly as she always had. Wake before dawn, uniform pressed, hair tight, knife work steady. No one looked twice at a cook doing her job well. That invisibility wrapped around her like armor now. It was easier than being seen. But sleep didn't come easily. When it did, it was thin and shallow. She dreamed of wind, not sound, not force, just movement. Invisible pressure bending everything without asking permission. She'd wake with her heart steady but her chest tight, like she'd forgotten something important and her body refused to explain what. The notebook stayed hidden. She didn't open it again, not yet. A week passed, then another. The news cycle moved on exactly the way Stone had predicted. Headlines flared and died. Names were mentioned without context, photos without understanding. The story became something tidy enough to digest and forget. Rowan read it during breaks, her face calm as she wiped down counters and scrubbed pans. She felt nothing reading her own work, rendered anonymous. That scared her more than guilt would have. Gunnery Sergeant Callahan called her into his office one afternoon. He didn't sit behind his desk this time. He stood, arms folded, watching her the way instructors watched recruits during inspections, quietly, completely. They amended your father's record, he said. She didn't react at first, then the words caught up. They corrected it, he continued, as much as they're willing to. He slid a folder across the desk. Inside, her father's service record bore new language, special operations, valor recognized, a line closer to truth even if it would never fully touch it. Rowan closed her eyes briefly. Thank you, she said. Wasn't me, Callahan replied, but whoever did it wanted you to know something. What's that? That ghosts aren't forgotten, even when their work stays buried. That night, Rowan finally opened the notebook again. She read her father's earlier entries differently now. What once felt clinical now felt heavy with restraint. Each shot he described wasn't a boast, it was a confession, proof that he'd weighed the cost every time and accepted it anyway. She turned to the blank pages at the back. March 28, Montana. She wrote slowly, carefully, no embellishment, just truth, distances, conditions, outcomes. She stopped before writing names, closed the notebook. Some things didn't need to be preserved in ink. Weeks later, another summons came, this one quieter, more deliberate. A building on the edge of base. No signage, no flags. Inside, men in suits waited. Not uniforms, not insignia. Power carried differently here, soft voices, direct eyes, no wasted motion. They didn't congratulate her, they didn't flatter. They offered her a place. A role that didn't exist. A path her father had walked until it ended him. Rowan listened without interrupting. When they finished, the room felt expectant, like it was holding its breath the way the range had. "No," she said. One of them frowned slightly. "You understand what you're walking away from." "Yes," she replied, "and what I'm walking toward." They studied her, not offended, measuring. "You already are what we're offering," one said quietly. "You just don't want the title." "Correct." She stood, they let her go. Stone walked her out. "You sure?" he asked, not testing, just asking. "I am," she said, "but I won't forget how to do it." He smiled, sad, proud, both. "That's enough." Months passed. Rowan started visiting the range early before her shifts. She didn't announce herself, didn't posture. She corrected fundamentals when asked, watched quietly when she was. The younger Marines didn't know her story. They didn't need to. One morning, a young woman stayed behind after a session, hesitation written all over her posture. "They say you made an impossible shot once," the private said. "Is that true?" Rowan considered the question, considered how many times the word impossible had been used to excuse fear. "No," she said gently, "I made a prepared one." The private frowned. "What's the difference?" Rowan handed her the rifle. "Preparation doesn't look impressive from the outside. That's why people miss it." They shot together as the sun climbed. Each hit rang like punctuation against the morning. Later, back in the mess hall, Rowan moved through her work with the same care she gave the range. Feeding people mattered. It always had. Nourishment was a quieter kind of protection, but no less real. That night alone, she stood by the window of her barracks and watched the wind move through the trees. She finally understood what her father had tried to give her, not just skill, but choice. The ability to act when necessary and to live when it was. Dignity didn't announce itself. It waited. And when the moment came, it acted, once cleanly, then stepped back into silence. Why did the letter arrive on a day that looked exactly like every other? Rowan almost missed it. It sat on her bunk among routine orders and supply slips, an envelope too plain to demand attention. No insignia, no return address, just her name, written with deliberate care. She stared at it longer than necessary, something in her chest tightening in recognition before her mind caught up. She didn't open it right away. Some instincts weren't learned, they were inherited. The mess hall was louder than usual that afternoon. A unit was rotating out. Laughter bounced off steel surfaces. Relief had a sound to it, and Rowan recognized it. She moved through the noise like a shadow, her hands steady, her thoughts elsewhere. Only when the hall finally quieted did she return to her bunk and seal herself inside the small, private square of space the military allowed. She sat, breathed once, then opened the envelope. Inside was a single page. "Rowan, if you're reading this, it means the world hasn't changed as much as it pretends to. I hoped you never hear from me again. That would have meant the cost held." It didn't. Stone's handwriting, older now, less sharp at the edges, but unmistakable. "There's movement we didn't predict. People we thought were finished have resurfaced under different names, different flags. It's not your father's war. It's not even mine anymore. But it's heading somewhere familiar. I won't ask you to come back. That choice is yours, it always was. But I needed you to know your father's work is still holding. Because of him, because of you." She read the letter twice, then a third time. No coordinates, no request, No urgency spelled out in ink. Just truth. Rowan folded the page carefully and placed it inside the notebook. Then she lay back on her bunk and stared at the ceiling until lights out, listening to the building settle around her. The old conflict stirred, not fear, not desire, responsibility, the quiet kind that didn't shout until it was impossible to ignore. She didn't sleep much that night. The next morning, she ran longer than usual. Let the burn in her lungs simplify her thoughts. The base stretched awake around her, Marines forming up, engines turning over, life continuing in ordered motion. She wondered how many of them carried questions they never voiced, how many stood at crossroads no one else could see. At the range, the young private from weeks before was already there, adjusting her sling with frustrated hands. "Morning," Rowan said. The private looked up, relief flickering across her face. "I can't get the consistency right. Everything feels off." Rowan knelt beside her, adjusted the stock by a fraction. "You're chasing the last shot," she said. "Forget it. Focus on the next breath." The private nodded, exhaled, fired. A clean hit. Her smile was immediate, unguarded. Something warm settled in Rowan's chest. Not pride, purpose. That afternoon, Callahan found her again. Not in his office this time, but outside, watching recruits move through drills. "You ever think about leaving?" he asked. She considered the question honestly. "Sometimes." "Why haven't you?" Rowan watched a recruit stumble, recover, keep moving. "Because this place feeds people," she said. "Sometimes literally, sometimes in other ways." Callahan nodded. "Stone sent a message through channels," he said carefully. "Didn't use your name, but I know who it was meant for." She didn't respond. "He said the door isn't open," Callahan continued. "It's just not locked." Rowan's gaze stayed forward. "Doors work both ways." "Yes," Callahan agreed, "they do." That night she dreamed of her father for the first time in years. Not the way he died, not the way he trained her, just the two of them sitting on a tailgate watching dust drift across open land. No words, no urgency. When she woke, her decision felt lighter, not easier but clearer. She wrote a single line in the notebook. Still watching, still choosing. Weeks passed, then months. The letter faded into memory without disappearing entirely. Rowan didn't pack her gear. She didn't make contingency plans. She lived, fully, quietly. She learned which Marines needed extra food without asking, which ones lingered because they didn't want to be alone, which smiles were real and which were armor. One evening, a broadcast flickered across the common room television. Foreign footage. An arrest. A man led away in cuffs under a different name, a different passport. The caption scrolled past too quickly for most to notice. Rowan noticed. She didn't feel triumph, just relief, tempered by realism. Another head cut from a hydra that would never fully die, but fewer teeth still mattered. Stone's letter had been a warning. It had also been closure. Later that night, Rowan walked out past the lights, past the noise, to where the base met open ground. The wind moved across the dark the same way it always had, patient, indifferent, honest. She thought of the range, the mess hall, Montana, her father's final choice, her own. Strength, she realized, wasn't about staying or leaving. It was about being ready to do either without losing yourself. She placed the notebook back beneath her pillow when she returned, not because she needed it close, but because she respected what it represented. Some legacies aren't meant to be continued endlessly. They're meant to be honored quietly, by living well, by choosing wisely, and by knowing that when the moment comes, if it ever does, you won't need permission to act. Why did the quiet feel heavier than the gun ever had? Rowan noticed it most in the early mornings when the base hadn't decided what kind of day it wanted to be yet, before commands echoed, before engines roared, before people put on the versions of themselves the world expected. In that brief hour, everything was honest, and honesty had weight. She stood outside the mess hall one dawn, coffee cooling in her hands, watching the flag rise against a pale sky. The fabric caught the wind, resisted it, then settled. She realized she'd spent most of her life doing the same, meeting pressure, adjusting, holding. The notebook stayed under her pillow, untouched now for weeks. Not avoided, rested, like a weapon cleaned and secured, trusted to be there without being brandished. Life moved forward in small, meaningful ways. The private she'd helped at the range started showing up earlier. Then others followed. No one announced Rowan as an instructor. She never claimed the role. She just corrected grips, reminded them to breathe, taught them how to listen to the environment instead of fighting it. Wind wasn't an enemy, she told them. It was information. Word spread quietly. Respect always did. One afternoon, a visiting unit ran qualifications. Confidence was high. Too high. Rowan watched from the shade, arms crossed loosely, eyes taking in posture, impatience, the subtle tells of people trying to prove something instead of learn. Shots rang out, misses followed. She didn't step in until asked. "Corporal," a lieutenant said, frustration creeping into his voice. "Any insight?" Rowan approached the line slowly, picked up a handful of dust, let it fall. "You're all fighting the same thing," she said, "and none of you are listening to it." They adjusted, shots tightened. No applause followed, just nods, that was enough. That night a storm rolled in without warning. Rain hammered the tin roofs. Wind howled through the gaps between buildings. Rowan lay awake, listening, feeling something settle inside her instead of stir. She dreamed again, but this time it wasn't of the past. She dreamed of standing at a range she'd never seen before. No targets, no rifle, just open space, and the understanding that she didn't need to fill it. When she woke, her chest felt light. Weeks later, Callahan retired. The ceremony was small, intentional. He shook hands, accepted a plaque he didn't look at for long, and stood beside Rowan afterward as people filtered away. "You did good work here," he said. "So did you," she replied. He studied her face for a moment. "You ever regret not taking their offer?" Rowan thought of Montana, of the shot, of the aftermath, of the mess hall at noon, full of noise and life and people who didn't know how close the world sometimes came to breaking. "No," she said, "I don't regret knowing I could." Callahan smiled. "That's the right answer." Before he left, he handed her something wrapped in plain cloth. "My old spotting scope," he said. "I won't need it where I'm going." Rowan accepted it with quiet reverence. "Thank you." That evening she climbed a low ridge beyond base. Nothing dramatic, just enough elevation to see farther than usual. She set up the scope, scanned the horizon, not looking for threats, just observing. The world looked fragile from a distance. It always had. Months turned into a year. Rowan was promoted, reluctantly. Responsibilities grew, not power, just reach. She used it carefully, advocated quietly, made sure the right people were seen before they burned out or disappeared into the cracks. The notebook stayed where it was. Then one morning, she woke with a familiar certainty. Not urgency, not fear. Closure. She took the notebook out for the first time in months and flipped to the last page. Read her father's final words again, then her own. She added one more entry. Legacy complete, weight shared. She closed it and didn't put it back under the pillow. Instead, she locked it in her footlocker, not as a secret, but as an artifact, a chapter finished. That afternoon, she volunteered to cook for a unit returning from deployment. The mess hall filled with tired bodies and relieved laughter. Rowan worked the line, serving extra portions without comment, meeting eyes, offering nods that said, "I see you. You made it back." One Marine paused longer than necessary. "Ma'am," he said quietly, "thank you." "For what?" she asked. He shrugged, searching for words. "For being steady." She watched him walk away before answering softly, to no one in particular. Someone has to be. That night the wind moved through the trees again, same as always. Rowan stood by the window, older now, not in years but in understanding. She had carried her father's gift. She had honored his choice without becoming trapped by it. She had learned that strength wasn't defined by how much you could endure, but by how much you could set down without losing yourself. Some people are loud with their courage. Others let it speak only once. And sometimes, the bravest thing a person can do isn't to pull the trigger, but to know exactly when they no longer need to. Because dignity doesn't demand attention. It doesn't announce itself. It simply acts, and then returns quietly to the life it protects.